In the history of American television, he was the highest paid actor. The highest paid, not among the highest paid. $100,000 for each episode of a show in which he portrayed a version of himself so well that viewers were unable to distinguish between the man and the role. He co-starred in Wall Street with Michael Douglas. He helped the movie win the Academy Award for Best Picture while standing in Oliver Stone's Platoon's Mud and Fire. Charlie Sheen was his name, and he appeared to be able to withstand everything for a short, remarkable period of time. Beneath that bright legacy, however, is a tragedy that is not glamorous, but heartbreaking in ways that Hollywood rarely permits its icons to publicly reveal. Because the same man who made those enormous sums of money, performed on stages, and received millions of accolades, was secretly carrying a diagnosis, music, that he would not reveal to the public for 4 years. He was engaged in combat that neither a studio nor a camera team could record. He was losing. Then, in defiance of all logical expectations, he was not. A certain type of strength is developed over the protracted private years of rebuilding oneself, after everyone else has already written your obituary, rather than through victory. Charlie Sheen is 60 years old. He's sober. He remains upright. Leave a tribute in the comments for one of the most complex legends in Hollywood history if Charlie Sheen's journey has ever made you question what it truly costs to fall that far and still find your way back. Realizing that the start of this specific slide was characterized by the most spectacular success imaginable rather than failure is frightening. And that's where the story must start. Charlie Sheen did something in September of 2025 that very few people in his position have ever dared to do. He took a seat in front of the camera to tell the truth, or at least his version of it, rather than to sell a movie, declare a comeback, divert attention, or charm his way through a prepared speech. The Book of Sheen, his autobiography, was published. AKA Charlie Sheen, a 2-part documentary directed by Andrew Renzi, was released by Netflix on September 10th of that same year. It chronicled 7 family interventions, multiple divorces, a public meltdown that became a cultural phenomenon, and a medical diagnosis that altered everything. That month was his 60th birthday. Since December 2017, he had maintained his sobriety. Not everyone gave the documentary high marks. Sheen seemed to have no sincere regret for some of the most serious things he had done, according to The Guardian. Some reviewers claimed that the movie was overly compassionate, allowing the man to bask in the glory of his own mythology without properly addressing the people he had harmed. Those are accurate observations. They are also involved in this narrative. This is also true, though. After all of this, Charlie Sheen arrived at 60. He should have been completely consumed by the years that burned so fiercely and so quickly. The firings, the settlements, and the diagnosis. I am not calling all of this a comeback. I am calling it a reset. That word matters. A comeback implies a return to something that existed before. A reset implies the understanding that whatever came before is gone, and what remains is the question of what you choose to build in its place. This is his story. Carlos Erwin Esteves was born in New York City on September 3, 1965, the third child of Ramon Esteves, the man the world knew as Martin Sheen, and his wife Janet Templeton. The family was not wealthy. Martin Sheen was a working actor, talented and deeply committed to his craft. But the kind of stability that comes with genuine Hollywood success had not yet arrived. The Esteves household was shaped by discipline, by Catholic faith, and by the particular pressure that lives inside a home where the father is a man of enormous artistic ambition, and the financial reality has not yet caught up with the dream. They moved to Malibu when Carlos was still young, and it was there on the edges of Los Angeles that he and his older brother Emilio began making films. Not dreaming about making films, actually making them. Shooting on Super 8 cameras in the backyard and on the street, pulling in neighborhood friends who would themselves go on to become names. Rob Lowe was among them. Sean Penn was among them. There was something in that group, something restless and hungry and genuinely gifted that the city of Los Angeles seemed to attract and then sharpen into something harder and more dangerous. Carlos dropped his surname when he began pursuing acting professionally. He became Charlie Sheen, taking the stage name from his father's adopted name rather than carrying the family name into a career that was entirely his own. It was a quiet declaration of independence wrapped inside an act of inheritance. He wanted to be his own thing. He also wanted to honor where he came from. That tension between the man he was born as and the man he was trying to become would follow him for the next 4 decades. The breakthrough came with Oliver Stone. In 1986, Stone cast Charlie Sheen in Platoon, a film about the Vietnam War that was shot in the Philippines under conditions that were by every account grueling and transformative. Sheen was 20 years old. He was surrounded by actors who would define a generation. Tom Berenger, William Dafoe, Forrest Whitaker, Johnny Depp, and he held the center. He played Chris Taylor, a young soldier trying to understand what war does to the men who fight it, music, and what it does to the men who lead them. The performance was quiet and interior and deeply felt. It was not the performance of a young man showing off. It was the performance of a young man telling the truth. Platoon won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1987. It won Best Director for Oliver Stone. It was the film that made an entire generation look at the Vietnam War differently, and Charlie Sheen was its face and its conscience. Stone brought him back the same year for Wall Street as Bud Fox, the young ambitious stockbroker who falls under the corrupting spell of Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas in one of the defining performances of that decade. Sheen gave a performance of genuine complexity. He played a man who knew he was making the wrong choices and could not stop himself from making them. It was not difficult to watch that performance and believe that Charlie Sheen understood something about that particular kind of self-destruction from the inside. He was 21 years old. He had 2 of the most important films of the decade on his resume. The trajectory seemed not just promising, but inevitable. The kind of career that arrives fully formed and simply continues upward. What happened next was not inevitable. Nothing that happened next was inevitable. But it is also not entirely surprising because the same qualities that made Charlie Sheen magnetic on screen, the appetite, the intensity, the refusal to modulate or contain himself, were qualities that do not stay neatly inside the boundaries of a film set. They go home with you. They sit across from you at dinner. They follow you into every room you enter for the rest of your life. The talent and the trouble were never separate things. They were always the same thing, pointing in different directions on different days. In 2003, Charlie Sheen signed on to star in a new CBS sitcom called 2.5 Men. The show's premise was straightforward. 2 brothers living in a Malibu beach house, one of whom was a charming, dissolute, and constantly irresponsible jingle rider, and the other was a neurotic, recently divorced chiropractor raising his young son. Charlie Sheen would play the dissolute character, Charlie Harper. This observation is actually the reason the show was successful for so long, and he was turning it into comedy. He was making it warm. He was making it watchable. He was making 30 million people every week feel like they were in on the joke with him, rather than simply watching from outside a velvet rope. John Cryer played Alan Harper, the neurotic brother. Angus T. Jones played Jake, the halfman of the title. The 3 of them built something that by any metric that matters in American television was extraordinary. 2.5 Men was the most watched comedy on American television for most of its run. It was the kind of show that people watched with their families, that played in hospital waiting rooms and hotel lobbies, that became a reliable, comfortable presence in the rhythm of ordinary American life. And Charlie Sheen was the reason people turned it on. By the later seasons, he was earning $100,000 to $800,000 per episode. That figure bears repeating not for shock value, but because it is the number that explains everything that came after. Both the extraordinary excess of his personal life during those years and the extraordinary violence of the fall when it arrived. At 1 in 800